The Exorcist is one of the most beloved horror films of all time. It's full of iconic, memorable moments, and at least one handy tip for cleaning a crucifix. We've got to review the whole franchise, so let's start with the original classic. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Hello.
It's a very upbeat opening.
I mean, I could have made the obvious joke and I've said something very profane like "lick me" or something, but it's not that kind of show.
It isn't? What? This is a horror movie podcast, everyone. We get together, we talk about a horror movie, and coming up on this episode, we will be discussing The Exorcist because, well, there's a new one apparently coming later this year, so we're going to try and
supposedly.
we're going to try and work through the franchise, sort of in this, all these banked episodes that are going out while Tim's away on paternity leave. We're hoping to have done the whole franchise. Well, yeah.
Do you think there's anyone out there named Fran Chise?
It's possible. I mean, people are definitely named Fran. I don't know if the last name Chise is a thing, but who knows?
If I could find someone with that name, would you be willing to go out on a date with her if she's single and in your area?
Why do you sound like a sex bot ad? The singles in your area. Text now for hot sex. Oh dear. Yes, so we're going to look at The Exorcist. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning if we get spoiled. This is actually, we've done so many of the big classics, we've done so many of the big franchises. The Exorcist, for whatever reason, slipped through the cracks until now. But with a new one coming out, it made good sense to finally get to it. So
to finally reach into the crack and pull out a big classic.
What?
He said it slipped. He said it was a big classic that slipped through the cracks. So I'm saying we're reaching into the crack and
no, I got the literal meaning of it. I'm just baffled that that's where you're going with it.
I told you it's not that kind of show. Let's move on.
Yeah, The Exorcist is a story of a 12-year-old girl who gets possessed by a demon named Pazuzu. Did they ever actually say Pazuzu in this first movie, or is that something we find out later? I don't know if I caught it this time.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe like somewhere in the beginning or something. I don't know.
But young Reagan, played by Linda Blair, is possessed. She says all sorts of nasty things about mothers in hell and other such things. And of course, her mother, who is Chris, who's played by Erin Burstyn, who is an actress in the film, a single parent, seeks out help.
Wait, did you say Erin or Ellen?
Ellen.
Okay, if I said Erin, I was like, that's not right.
I'm sorry, my accent might have obscured the name a little bit, Tim. Ellen
sure.
Bernstein. Is that good?
Thank you.
Although I'm actually saying her last name wrong, technically, but that's fine.
It's fine.
It's Burstyn. There's no N. I keep putting an N before the T, but whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she seeks out help from the medical profession first, before delving into the world of
Mistake number one: never listen to medical professionals. I think we can all agree about that.
After the pandemic, I don't know if that joke lands as well as you think it does, Tim. Oh dear.
What, you don't think the pandemic would have went differently if we just went straight to the church?
I like how you emphasized the R in the word straight there for that. Oh dear. So we'll get into it. Obviously we've both seen this before. This is not a first time viewing for either of us. So I don't know, Tim, how do you feel about The Exorcist since that's where we are, the subject?
Well, first I have to say that so this movie is based on a book. I don't know if you knew that.
I was aware of that fact, yes.
So, but did you know that in the book, it's actually, supposedly it's based on a true story, and in the book, it's actually a little boy that gets possessed. So,
Uh-huh.
do you think this is like the first example of like woke Hollywood trying to, change the gender?
For the love of all things, please make it clear you're joking for any new people who have clicked on this who think you're actually being serious.
I was thinking about that today. I just saw how funny it would be to like have some like a fake men's rights activist like angry YouTube page and be like, "Oh, I can't believe they changed the boy in The Exorcist."
What's so funny about that joke is that like a lot of YouTube unfortunately is very successful for people who have like angry videos about people being too woke, right? There's a lot of that on YouTube. So I appreciate you trying to like catapult the success of the show, but I'd rather not lose our identity to do it, if you please.
Well, in the thumbnail it'll be like me like trying to rip my DVD in half or something like. Okay, yeah. So anyway, yeah. I mean, I've seen this movie. I mean, I can't really count how many times. Quite a handful. Because I'm a sick little freak. I love
not because you've seen it that many times, just because you can't count. It's only 4.
Right, yeah, no, it's a little tough. Yeah. But no, I mean Jesus, it's yeah, like you said, it's a classic. I don't know. Sometimes it's always hard to it's a little harder to talk about these kind of big name movies because it's like, oh yeah, I mean, who hasn't already, given their expertise on this? Like, there's a reason why, it's remembered and it's a classic and it's so many scenes are like stuck in our brains and there's so many lines and it's been parodied to death. It's because it's a it's an excellent film. I
think what worries me about what you just said is there was an implication there what they're about to get from us is also expertise.
Well, I mean, they can tell from the first 9 minutes of the show or whatever that we're nothing if not serious journalism. Yeah, journalism, sure.
Really not. We're not journalists. No one quote that.
No, I mean, I think it's great. It's one of those movies. I mean, maybe is because I grew up in a I guess like a town that had a large Catholic population, I guess, but it was always something that was kind of like touted as being like one of the scariest movies ever growing up, and I think I don't like one of those examples of movies of like people fainting in the aisles and stuff when it was released, which yeah, I mean which sometimes you hear that and it's like, oh okay, yeah, it's just hyperbole, but I think it makes sense like for this movie though, because it's like at the time it came out, like, yeah, this would have been like really shocking to see. I think especially if you are like a religious person and you do believe that it's like based on a true story and stuff, like then yeah, it is very probably like upsetting and scary to watch. But I mean,
I'd love to go back in time and like after the audience goes out to watch The Exorcist in 1973, they come out and you send them right back in and make them watch Terrifier 2 and see how they take that.
Oh my. But no, I mean, I think like honestly, I mean, you rewatching it, I think some of the stuff today is still like pretty out there. Obviously, as horror fans, we do have a tendency to seek out like stuff that is sticking to praise. So I've seen a lot of stuff intentionally worse, but I don't know, maybe it's something about the movie, since it's like so well directed though, or like the acting's so good that it does feel like like it's not like sleazy or anything. Like it does feel like there is a something kind of sinister about it. But yeah, no, I mean, it's again, it's a masterpiece. I love it. I watched it as a kid. I was scared of it as a kid, and I continue watching it as an adult just because it's a great horror movie to throw on every now and again. And just remind me not to mess around with Satan, because your boy ain't getting possessed anytime soon. That's for sure.
You might get repossessed.
And also, but the other thing too, like, I mean, honestly, like, similar maybe to a little bit to like, with like Romero and zombies, like, can we kind of credit Friedkin with like inventing the like exorcism genre? Like, I don't think it's like, not that people didn't know what an exorcist or an exorcism was like before then, but like, I feel like this is what put it on the map, and like why, we have a glut of like exorcist movies today.
Oh, sure. Like, you don't have shark movies without Jaws. You don't have Exorcist movies without The Exorcist. Like, it's just, yeah, definitely.
And honestly, like, probably, like, I mean, I guess maybe you could say similar to Jaws as well, but like, yeah, one of like the only good ones. Like, I don't know. I feel like exorcisms are like a well that, especially in the 2000s, I feel like people went back to a lot, and like, I don't know. I don't think many of them are done very well.
Yeah. One of the things you said there was with the director and acting, it doesn't feel schlocky or anything, and that's one of the big things is that William Friedkin, the director, he treats this like an A movie. He treats this like he's making this serious film, and even if some individual moments you could look at out of context and go, that's actually a little bit goofy when you stop and really think about it, but they work so well in the moment because of how the film's directed and how it builds up to those moments. I mean, obviously I like the movie. No. It's very well directed.
No, sorry. You're making me think of something. When you're bringing that up, because Friedkin obviously is like A-list big name director and everything, and I'm kind of wondering, like, I mean, maybe it's only these two examples, but like, Friedkin doing this and like Kubrick doing The Shining, like, these big name directors that like, want to tackle like something in the horror genre. Like, I feel like I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like you don't really like see that nowadays. Like, it feels like a lot of people that do horror stuff are like kind of, it's like, all right, you're the horror person, then like you kind of stick to this, little horror area or whatever. But I don't know, something interesting about like, looking in the past and like, having like big name directors like this, and having them want to be like, oh no, like I want to tackle a horror movie, and then like you say, like not necessarily treating it like a schlocky horror movie, but bringing their A game and trying to make it into like something more, and which is one of the reasons why they kind of last the test of time and stand out. But
I mean, Friedkin's on record at the time of saying he didn't think of it as a horror movie, which maybe is partially why.
Yeah. Okay.
Although he accepts that everyone else thinks of it as a horror movie, like, and its legacy, but at the time when he was making it, he never thought of it as a horror movie. Funnily enough,
I guess it is kind of a romantic comedy, I guess, if you look back. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like the movie. It's very well directed. But I will give you a slightly hot take here, Tim.
Oh no.
I don't put it on the pedestal that the rest of the horror loving world does. Like, I think it's really good.
Okay.
I think it's great even, but for it's not even in my top 10. Like, it's really good, but it doesn't make my top 10. And I think part of that, and I think that this is relevant to the conversation here, is that I am atheist, and there are elements of this film that leave me kind of cold.
Sure. Yeah.
And I would also say what's interesting about the joke you cracked early on about like the angry right-wing dude who's mad that they changed it from a boy to a girl. I think what's funny about that to me is that this film is actually very conservative in a lot of what it does, in terms of its politics, in terms of what it's doing. Because one of the big things that really, like, if you go looking for any kind of analysis on The Exorcist, if you go digging for any kind of like critique of it, one of the things you'll mainly find is the idea that it's about female puberty and growing up, and the fear that a young innocent girl will become a woman who knows about sex. So, and when you watch it through that lens, you can kind of see, and you do kind of get this kind of old school vibe of like the fear of that. You can bring in the men to sort her out, kind of thing. Bring in the men,
bring in the church, bring in religion. Yes. Like, yeah, makes sense.
So there's a lot of that kind of stuff in there that, like, I think it's really well done, and that like the way it has all these themes and the way it does everything, it's all very well done. I just don't necessarily agree with the stance that I feel like the movie's taking by the end, and part of that is just kind of a, I disagree. Ultimately.
Sure.
But obviously, it is a sort of work of like spooky fiction where you've got a demon and you've got the idea of trying to drive the demon out of this innocent girl. And you've got because it's really the priest, Father Karras, who has the arc of the film. He's the one that's got it's really his story in a lot of ways. Like his story's pretty good. Obviously, Max von Sydow is the older priest, Father Merrin, who's kind of the experienced sort of mythological exorcist. I think it does a good job of portraying kind of the family life before she starts to change. One of the other big themes of the film, of course, is the absence of a father figure. And what do we call priests, Tim?
Daddies.
I was looking for the word father, but yes. Do you think that's like a correct? That's why they picked father to like what you call a priest, is because they just secretly all want to be called daddy.
I'm pretty positive that is exactly why. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, save me, daddy! I've sinned. Like, gross.
So yeah, it's. So it's very good. Like I'm not really going to critique much of it and say anything's bad about it, really, other than just the some of the concepts and some of the sort of stances that it takes. That ultimately, and I have no problem with like demons and stuff being real in movies. It's there for the horror, it's there for the fiction, it's whatever, it's fine, whatever. But this film is very much about a character who is sort of having a crisis of faith and. Ultimately, to try and like defeat his story is that he has to kind of like regain that faith and believe, and because we're in a movie with those demons and we're talking about stuff, it's all very literal and things like that. So but it's still very good. Like I don't want anyone to think I'm shitting on it, because it is obviously a classic for a reason. It's got numerous really well done sequences, but there is this attitude in it where like doctors are all a bunch of idiots who fail her and don't know what to do, but the church will be there to save her, kind of thing.
That's like a problem like I never really had like growing up, but like as I do kind of get older, and I would I don't know if I necessarily call myself atheist. Maybe I'm a little bit more on the agnostic end, but like growing up, my family did go to church and stuff, and there definitely was like a period where I would like, believed in God and went to church and all that stuff. And then, if anyone does that, that's, hey, do what you want to do. Obviously no, what do you call it? No, judgment or anything, but just, for me, like, I kind of like grew away from that. And then it is, sometimes it is kind of tough, like with movies that deal with, demons or possession or stuff. Like, again, like it's, cool to have a fun demony horror movie, but sometimes when it gets a little too churchy and like it's the
I love that, a little too churchy.
It's like like who can save the day, like surely those wacky priests that never did do anything wrong, like they're the ones to call when
I do think, for the record, I don't think every movie about possession or demons inherently has a pro like Catholic or pro religion bent to it. I think in most cases it's just they want to do a cool demon movie or possession movie because they like possession movies, and that's just an inherent part of it, is you have those types of characters, those types of plot devices. I think Exorcist specifically though does feel like it has kind of a political statement or a theological statement, and I do think it's making a statement by the end, and it's just not one that I typically agree with. So fundamentally, like on that level, there's just an element of it that makes me feel leaves me feeling just a little bit cold in the end, where I don't agree with what it's saying. But that's not a bad thing necessarily. Not every movie that's made with a message has to be something that I agree with, but
no, of course not.
But it is worth mentioning. It's why something like Night of the Living Dead, which is also a very politically rich film as it seems, like appeals to me way more, because I get the message, I understand that the idea of like not being a part of the mob and the crowd and being individual, like I agree with that message, I accept that message, and I side with it. Whereas here, I'm like, no, let her grow up. Let her know about sex. Let her be her own person. This idea of the loss of innocence, which is a theme that I like in horror movies, but it's, I like it better done in other movies that handle it in a way that doesn't have this type of, I guess, fear of it, I suppose, which, because there's, horror movies, obviously for every kind of very liberal horror film like Night of the Living Dead, I think there is, a conservative, after, 9/11. I didn't think I was going to bring up 9/11 on this Exorcist review, but here we are. After 9/11, there was a lot of home invasion movies because there was this general fear at the time of people from the outside coming in and causing harm. And I don't think they're all particularly conservative, but that certainly ties into a broad fear that led to more conservatism.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to track these things. So when you look at when this movie came out and you look at it's the early 70s. You've got sort of Watergate around this time. You've got this lack of trust. You've got sort of the tail end of Vietnam and the disillusion and the idea that we're losing innocence and there's no just pure good and evil anymore. Everything's getting murky. This movie almost is this beacon of trying to be, let's make it black and white again. Let's make it more straightforward and good versus evil, and the church can help. So I don't want to say it's religious propaganda because I think that's a bit too harsh, but
no.
Certainly the message and the William Peter Blatty, who wrote the book and was involved with the movie as well, and eventually directed the third one. He, I believe, was Catholic, or at least grew up Catholic. I don't know if he's necessarily still practicing as Catholic at this point, but I have a somewhat mixed relationship with a very well-made movie.
Yeah.
But obviously all the actual antics that Reagan gets up to with the effects and the shaking in bed and the vomiting, all that stuff. And, we're in spoiler-free, but everyone knows these things about The Exorcist. I'm not going to sugarcoat the well-known stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, that stuff is great. And, how can you get mad at a movie that gives us, tubular bells like that? Music cue is so good.
Yeah, Joe, what's so weird about it is that it doesn't... at least, so I watched the director's cut because it was just the only version that was available to me.
Okay.
Right? And it changes the ending a little bit, and it has the spider walk scene in it.
Yeah. I remember that was a big deal when
it came out. I remember.
Yeah, I saw it in theaters when that. Not sure how old I was. I would have probably been in middle school, maybe high school, but I remember I'd already seen the movie, but it being oh my god, it's in theaters and it's got new scenes, holy shit.
It's been a while since I've seen the theatrical cut, but so maybe it's different in the end of the theatrical cut. But there's not a good moment where the music Tubular Bells kicks in at the end. I could have sworn there's a scene where he looks down the stairs and then the music kicks in, or something.
I'm pretty sure that's how it happens. In the version I watched.
Okay, yeah, because in the director's cut, it just kind of you hear it a little bit, and then it goes into different music for the credits, and then halfway through the credits, it kicks into Tubular Bells properly. I mean,
that's weird.
You hear it early on in the film at one point when Chris is just walking around, but it doesn't have that moment where it kicks in like a big deal.
Yeah,
it's almost like Friedkin was getting a little bit pretentious and was annoyed that it was too much of a crowd pleasing moment. No.
Yeah.
My film is serious art. You will not be satisfied with dopamine.
I forget what podcast it was, but I listened to a podcast that they basically did a whole episode about where the song came from, and it was actually really interesting. The guy that wrote it seemed like he was
Mike Oldfield, I want to say.
Maybe. Yes, I apologize. Yeah, I'm not. Don't remember, but it seemed like he was kind of crazy, but in a geniusy kind of way, because because I think mostly you only kind of hear that first little part, which is great, but I think the song is 17 minutes long or something crazy like that.
Oh no, it's way longer than that. It's like an hour long. It's yeah, because my parents had the CD when I was a kid, and it's literally just one big track that plays for the whole time.
Yeah, and it goes into like so many different, like types of.
There's a part where it starts
I don't know about music, but yeah.
It starts announcing like the instruments that it plays. Like there's like a vocal that comes in that says, guitar, piano.
That's awesome. But yeah, it sucks I don't remember the name of the podcast, because it was really interesting about how he came up with it and like what some of the different parts of it mean and stuff. But hey, maybe if you Google podcast something horror tubular bells, maybe it'll come up. I don't know. I can't do all the research for you. Come on, do a little bit for yourself.
What are you whining about? I go off to let a cat out, and I'm back, and you're whining at the audience for not doing enough research, like, which seems a bit bold.
They put too much pressure on me. They want me to have all the answers, but sometimes you just got to Google it yourself. My God.
Yeah. No, obviously that's a very iconic bit of music, and I think people like I've heard of people who are more casual horror fans mixing it up with the Halloween theme.
Classic mistake.
It's just funny to me, because I mean I think they sound completely different, and they do sound completely different. They just happen to both have a lot of piano in them. But it is interesting that, obviously just later in the decade, Halloween sort of like maybe there was some inspiration from Tubular Bells when Carpenter was coming up with these score for Halloween.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Hey, Michael Myers is another little kid that did something very bad. So there's a connective theme there.
It's a loose connection, but I'll sure, we can go with it. You could argue that Michael Myers is possessed if you want to, I suppose.
Yeah. By those darn Cult of Thorn people or whatever. Now, do you think if they just like, after the beginning of Halloween, do you think if they just spanked Michael a couple of times that he would have been okay?
For killing his sister, spank him a couple times.
Yeah. It's like, no, this is bad.
Bad Michael.
Yeah.
Does the logic track with this one? Like, do you just spank Reagan when she starts like saying foul language and making all sorts of threats and whatever else she's doing? I think one of the things that was interesting to me about watching it again, because it has been a while since I watched it, is that how it kind of like starts like Reagan's like stuff of like her path to like possession, because it kind of happens off camera where she, Chris takes her to the doctor, and we actually don't see that much of like why she's going to the doctor. Like, it kind of holds it close to the chest before that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a slow burn movie, and I feel like all the iconic stuff with her being possessed and tied up, like, compared to the rest of the movie, like, that's not that much, honestly.
Yeah, no, you can kind of break it into three clear sort of parts. You've got your introductory sort of act, which is introducing both, like, Reagan and her mother, Chris, but also Father Karras. And then you've got the middle section, which is when Karras kind of comes on board once, like, they've established, or at least once Chris believes that her daughter actually is possessed or might be possessed. And it's him trying to, like, deduce if that's true or not. And then the last act, of course, is actually bringing in the experienced exorcist to help actually try and exorcise the demon from her, right? That's just how the movie kind of breaks down. But it is kind of interesting, like, just how, like, shielded it keeps us from the early incidents of Reagan, and then shows as they get worse, obviously, after that point. But, like, the first things we hear about, the reason why she's taken her to the doctor, are mostly, we hear her talking about, like, an imaginary friend, Captain Howdy. She mentions that her bed shook, but she, it never, like, I don't think it shows us enough as an audience to think she used to go to the doctor. Like, I don't think I get that from those scenes, but clearly there's other stuff that her mother's noticing that she's decided to go to the doctor with her. But I just thought that was interesting from a
for sure, yeah.
From a choice perspective, or even just opening in Iraq for like for 5 minutes with Father Merrin like uncovering like a statue of Pazuzu, and just this feeling of like existential dread, kind of before it cuts to like the modern world. Actually, one of the things I was thinking about watching this is that, and this goes along with a lot of movies in the 70s, horror movies specifically, is that Psycho started it, but one of the things that this has in common with, say, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and later Halloween, obviously, but just even stuff in the early 70s like Black Christmas, is that it's once again it's taking the horror and putting it into the real world. You know, this is a modern building, a modern house, a modern mother with a daughter. This is not like some castle somewhere. It's not some spooky hidden retreat. It's horror in the real world, and Texas Chainsaw is like that. Black Christmas is like that. Psycho, of course, is the first one that everyone sort of thinks about, which is obviously 1960, a good decade or so before. But even though it's a very different plot and it's a very different type of horror because it's possession and it's supernatural, it's putting it into the... And I think that's partly why it probably was so scary at the time. Yeah, you've got the religious side to it. If you're religious, maybe this is even scarier because you actually believe in demons and shit. But then it's just scary as well because it's like, oh no, this is like a real person. It's not even just a real person. This is a successful actress with her daughter who are the victim of this. This is like going after someone who we think of actors who are rich people, I suppose, maybe in general, as being powerful, of having some level of control over their lives. You know, and Chris at the start of the movie feels relatively in control. She's glamorous. She's got like servants in her house. She seems to enjoy her job and whatever. So
whatever.
yeah. Let's just, you know, her and Reagan have a good relationship, which is interesting because, you know, I said earlier that one of the big parts of the movie that's sort of there in the subtext, not even, I mean, it's mentioned a few times, but is the idea that there's no father figure, right? That the mother is separated from the father. And I think it's interesting that I think the last time Reagan is completely normal, I could be wrong on this, but I think it's when she overhears her mother talking on the phone to her dad about why he's not coming for her birthday. And it's almost like if you were going to try and talk about how this might just be not real. I mean, the movie makes it clear that it is real, but the trigger for it could be this idea of the absent father and the idea that he doesn't care enough to come see her being what kind of like sets it off. Or at the very least, you could look at it this way, is that it lowers her guard down because she gets upset and that lets the demon in properly, I guess. Like maybe Pazuzu was like hanging around talking to her or, you know, with the Ouija board or whatever, but then when she got angry and upset over her father not coming, that's kind of the emotion let it in. No?
Yeah. No, that's a good theory. I like that.
Well, I gotta have some. I mean, you know. But yeah, I guess we'll give the spoiler warning just so we can freely talk about everything in the movie. So spoilers for The Exorcist if you've somehow, you know, not seen it.
Yeah. Like people like listening to the podcast when we get to spoilers just get like so hyped, like yeah, they raise their hands and they go spoilers. Like let us know what, you know, when we break through the spoiler wall. Let us know like how you react. Like, yeah, point to whoever you're sitting next to on the bus and go like spoilers, or like, are you at work and you just like sit up in your chair and go woo, spoilers.
How am I supposed to respond to that? What am I supposed to say?
But you're not supposed to respond. I'm asking our customers to respond.
Customers.
What do you call them?
Listeners, viewers, audience, whatever. That's it. If all of them want to pay for every episode, like I'm not going to turn it down.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I mean, like you got the absence of the father figure, which is kind of then in some way filled by the church, right? It's filled by the Holy Father, the spiritual father, if you will.
Not a bad father.
Yeah, depends, I suppose.
As far as fathers go, I guess it could be worse.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. At the end of the movie,
what do you want from me? I don't know.
I don't know. But at the end of the movie, when Reagan's like fine, like in the last scene, she notices the collar on like the other priest that's kind of, you know, the one that's still alive at the end, and kisses him in the cheek. And it's this idea that she, even though she doesn't remember everything that happened, and you know that's part of the conservative idea of the movie is that she's forgotten all of the awakening and is back to being this sweet innocent girl for a bit more time. You know, maybe you could argue that maybe you could argue that the idea is that like we don't want, like, kids are growing up too quickly, and they shouldn't, right? She deserves to still be a child for a little bit longer. But which raises the question, actually, is that I was thinking this as I was watching it, is that she acts like she's like an 8-year-old or like a 9-year-old at times. And then so later on when she's lying in the bed and the priest is like, what age are you? And she's like, I'm 12, mother effer. And I'm like, really? You actually felt like you were acting younger than that. I agree you look 12, don't get me wrong. But I thought it was a case of like a slightly older actor playing, you know, a younger character. But
yeah. It's a good point. I don't know. I feel like maybe it's not so much nowadays, but I feel like that is kind of a typical like young actor thing where it's like, yeah, you're either a teenager or you're like 5 or whatever. Like people always kind of play up the kid angle a bit more. But
maybe it may have been an intentional choice to make the like the profanity and like the stuff she says be more shocking. Like, oh, she seems so childlike and innocent before. And now she's talking about sucking cocks in hell and, you know, stabbing her crotch with a crucifix.
Oh, just imagine like all the old people in the theater went to see it. Oh my gosh.
By the way, I completely forgot that in the crucifix scene, she then grabs her mother's head and pulls it between her legs and says,
about that too.
Lick me. And then Chris has got...
is like covered in blood.
Yeah,
like...
she's got blood all over her face, and I'm like... What? That's nasty. That's your mother.
Yeah.
Reagan? I mean, I know it's technically not Reagan, but
yeah.
You know, but still. Anyway, yeah, so what I was saying is she kisses the priest, and it's the idea that even though she doesn't remember it, she is kind of found like fatherhood in like the church because she recognizes the priest and or not doesn't recognize him specifically, but recognizes what a priest is and finds comfort in it. So, and this is almost like a father, like sending them off, like waving them goodbye as they leave, kind of thing. So, I think it's definitely, you know, the missing father stuff is definitely a big part of it, and I think, which I don't have a problem with. You know, I think that's a fine like theme to have that kind of, you know, opens the door. You know, the idea that the because I think everything the doctors say about like depression like causing this, like I think that can still be true even if there's a real demon. Like the idea that the depression's what lets it in, kind of thing. You know, that can all still be valid. Because I think typically what we would do in a horror movie is we talk about how the demon is something that is, you know, like so. In other movies, it might just be depression, but the demon's a metaphor for depression. You take it and make it this literal thing. But it's really just about someone who's depressed, and I think, and that's kind of true here. You know, talking about the sexual, like repression stuff, because I think that's the interesting thing about that is that Chris is like they don't portray Chris and Reagan as unhappy before all this goes down. It's not like it's like, oh, they really need a man because like they're in disarray. Like they seem like they have a pretty healthy relationship. They seem pretty happy.
Yeah.
Like things are all right, and then you know, I guess it's the idea that everything can seem okay, but things will go to hell if you don't have a nuclear family with a father figure.
Oh boy,
she'll turn into like a little demonic slut. Like that's that's effectively what it's getting at. Because yeah, she says profane things. I think it's interesting that like the first time we hear about her being profane, we don't see it ourselves. We hear about it secondhand. Because it's the doctor who's like this. You know, he says, "Hey, has your daughter ever used like foul language?" And she's like, "Nah, not really. She's a little sweetheart." It's like, "Yeah, well, she kind of said some things when I was inspecting her." And she's like, "What did she say?" I'd rather not say. No, what did she say? Be specific. We're adults. What did she say? And apparently Reagan said to him, you know, keep your fingers away from my C-bomb. I'm not going to say it.
Oh boy.
YouTube will have a problem with me saying that, so I'm not going to say it.
Wow.
Which honestly, maybe this is my modern lens, but my first thought was, if I was the parent, I'd be like, well, what were you doing with your fingers when my daughter said this to you? Like, I agree the language is foul, but I'm questioning why she felt the need to say that.
Yeah. It's like, you're a dentist. What are you, what are you doing?
Maybe if he's in the movie Teeth, that would be okay.
Right, yeah, of course.
Yeah. They never did like that should have been a post-credit scene in Teeth. It'd be her going to the dentist It'd be like, no, not this mouth. I've got another
South Duck.
I've got another set that need to be checked.
Yeah.
Yikes. But I do think that's interesting. It's almost like it's shielding you a little bit from it before you actually see her do it. Before you hear her say the words. Before you. So
no, it's no, it's like very well done. Like it's all like it's a bit of a slow burn, but it is worth it because it leads up to such a shocking like change. When you start to see it.
That's it though.
Taking over.
No, I'm thinking about it. I don't think she herself ever says the C word, does she?
Not that I can recall.
We don't hear it. Maybe that's actually them avoiding it. Maybe like the idea of having the doctor say it is like maybe they thought it was too much to actually have the 12-year-old say it. So they thought, obviously decades later, Kick-Ass had no problem with having the 12-year-old girl dropping C-bombs. But maybe that was the idea, is that it was like, no, we'll have the adult man say she said it without actually having to have her say it on screen.
Yeah, and I mean I don't know which scenes are which, but they did have a like body double or stunt double or something for like for some of the like I think dirtier stuff.
Oh sure, yeah, that makes sense, because every time you see her from behind in the bed when she's talking about cocks or stabbing her, like, that's the thing. I always heard jokes about her masturbating with a crucifix. I'm like, she's not. That's not that's stabbing.
Yeah, it's very gross. Was this the movie where like I mean I think there was some controversy with like Friedkin because he's like a very intense director or something, but was there something about him like firing a gun on set to like get people like on edge and like more nervous so like they would look more scared but like during takes or something? Like I thought there was a story, unless I'm thinking of a different movie, where like right before they would like shoot he would like fire a gun so everyone's like, oh Jesus, like what the hell, and then they start filming and they're like all like nervous and shaking.
I don't know. That's just to me.
Do you not like watch like special features on DVDs or documentaries?
I did when I was a teenager when I had time to do it.
Yeah, R.I.P. special features. I used to love like getting a brand new disc, like 3-disc special edition, and then just like rip through like everything. And now you're lucky if anything has like if you if you're a good enough person that you still buy physical media, you're lucky if like a movie even has like an interactive menu. Now it's like special features. RIP.
If you're a good enough person to still be buying physical media, that's what you said there.
Yeah.
Good enough.
You're keeping the industry alive.
Hey, all my iTunes purchases come with extras. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them do.
All you're doing is making Mr. iTunes rich. That's not going to filmmakers. That's not going to Benicio del Toro. That's not going.
Why
to
do
Peter
you think
Jackson.
he gets a better cut of the physical DVD or Blu-ray than he does the iTunes release? And for the record, too much plastic in the world, Tim. Maybe not using discs for everything is probably a good idea.
Well, I'm keeping these things. I'm not like buying it and instantly throwing out the plastic case.
Yes, but one day when the formats are relevant and you'll have all your movies on something new, all the old plastic's just going to pile up.
Shoot into space or something. I don't care.
you got. There's going to be like a dead whale somewhere. It's going to be all your fault. It'll just be Tim's fault.
Well, until that day comes, I'm gonna support the industry I love.
Oh dear.
You turned your back on us. You used to be one of us. Used to be a collector. Now you're I don't know, a hacker.
Hey, discs stopped working and it stopped being reliable, and I was like, you know what? I'm done with this shit. I'm done with it.
I don't know what you're doing to those discs.
Disc rot is real, my friend. Just you wait. One day you're going to put in a Blu-ray and it won't work. What's worse is it's not like it doesn't work from the start. It breaks down at the layer change, so you'll watch like half the movie and then it'll just freeze and it'll not do anything else, and you'll be like, "No, I've watched half the movie. I want to see the end."
I feel like this only happens to you because like you live in a bog. Like,
shut up.
I'm pretty sure I'll be okay.
Shut up. Anyway, we're way off track here. We're talking about The Exorcist, Tim. You fool.
Right.
Yeah, so
1970 something.
73, yes. So yeah, and so we have to talk about Father Karras, who
Please.
obviously he early on we find out he's having a crisis of faith. He doesn't really feel passionate about what he believes in anymore, and he's kind of this like midpoint character where he's a priest but he's also a trained psychologist, so he kind of is in the middle of the two worlds. And even he recommends like medical treatment and psychology to Christopher Reagan when he's asked about it eventually. But we get an introduction to him where we find out he's got an old mother who is like dying.
Dammy, why you do this to me, Dammy?
That's what she sounds like. Yes, thank you for the impression, Tim. But she does pass away early on in the film, and he feels
Good
guilt.
riddance.
He feels guilt over not being able to take care of her, and
That was his save the cat moment. He totally botched it.
she died of old age. What makes to save the cat moment? What are you talking about? And he feels guilt, and this is something that the demon in Reagan uses. You know, like immediately is like, your mother's in here with us. She's in hell. She sucks cocks. Yada yada yada.
Right.
You know, all that stuff. And really tries to play at him. And it's this idea that if he's having a crisis of faith and this demon exists, like, doesn't that prove that everything is real? And what does that do to him? And, you know, he doesn't want to believe it at first, but he's like, hey, did Reagan know that my mother died recently? You know, is she speaking in a language that she wouldn't otherwise know? Like, because, you know, that's kind of something possessed people do, is they start speaking in Latin or something like that. Or some sort of ancient text.
Parlez-vous français?
That's what I paused to let you interject with.
Oh no, he's possessed. He's speaking French.
You know, but obviously the big clinching thing to prove that there needs to be a exorcism here
Is she pisses on the floor?
No, she, like, Reagan from inside the body carves "help me" in her stomach.
Oh, that too, yeah.
Yeah. Like,
But
Reagan.
the pissing on the floor, like, that didn't help things, though.
No, I mean, that doesn't mean you're possessed necessarily. It just might mean you're either disgusting or you've got a bladder problem.
Oh, of course, you always standing up for the piss freaks.
I'm not standing up for that. I'm just saying there's multiple reasons why someone might be pissing on the floor. You can't just jump to demonic possession.
Sure.
What is it? What time period you living in, Tim? Is this Salem witch trials time, where every little thing's like, it's a witch, it's a demon, it's a bunch of superstitious nonsense.
You nasty boy. I knew there's something nasty about you.
But I do think that's it is interesting that Karras immediately is like, yeah, you have to, if you want an exorcist, you have to go back in time like 400 years because it's just not done anymore. I do appreciate his skepticism, and it works for his arc that he is having this crisis of faith, and like, it is like the idea that in a weird way, if not that in biblical lore God created demons, but if the idea that the purpose of a demon is to like test and prove that like everything is real, and like sort of test your belief in it, like, it makes sense that this ultimately is about him, and that it's trying to get to him, and he is ultimate one with the arc. You know, because, you know, Max von Sydow obviously has got a great presence when he shows up. You get the classic silhouette shot in the streetlight when he arrives.
Great intro, yeah.
But ultimately, he dies. Ultimately, he dies off camera when he's with Reagan.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, Karras is too close to this. He's getting too tempted by the conversation. You know, the demon's toying with him because he keeps bringing up his mother, and it's making him freak out. He goes in on his own, and he ultimately dies. And as a result, Karras goes in and has to
beat the shit out of her.
He does. He slaps the shit out of this girl.
Oh, not just slapping. He's like punching her on the ground.
Which, you know, I think, you know, is, you can read this as like the, again, if you want to look at this movie as slightly problematic, you could say, so a girl starts to have a sexual awakening, is not literally, but that's what the metaphor is that, you know, like, all of the disgusting liquids coming out of her is like a metaphor for get her period. You know, you could look at it that way. And
the green slime that she throws up is clearly the green slime women throw up when they're on their period.
I thought your wife to see a doctor, Tim, if you're actually experiencing green slime, like, you know, shooting around the place. But yeah, so you've got this thing where two old men. Well, I mean, Karis isn't that old, but Max von Sydow's pretty old. Although what's amazing, Max von Sydow was still acting like 30 years later. So, and they keep talking about how old he is in this movie, and I'm like, he's going for like several more decades after this. He's not even close to being done.
He's in Star Wars.
That's right. I was thinking Minority Report time, but yeah, you're right. He was in 2015 Star Wars. Jeez. Anyway, so yeah, you've got like two old men to come in and like sort of see to her and try and like fix her, try and fix the teenage girl who is becoming a woman, kind of idea. So you've got this fear of awakening. You've got this fear of like an outside influence, like, oh, she's not the little girl that she always was before. There's an outside voice. In this case, it's a demon, but in real life, it would be, you know, other kids, peer pressure, the temptation to like start doing more adult things, you know, an interesting sex, all that stuff.
Yeah, starting to go to arcades, getting into Pac-Man or
that's very specific, but
whatever.
Yeah, so you know, it represents the fear of that and the struggle to try and maintain the classic nuclear family and the innocence of this child, not necessarily for her own good, largely, which is why I think the movie's really kind of bittersweet if you're sort of looking at it through all these lenses where you're sort of critical of what it's actually saying and doing. Obviously, literally, it's a good thing. Literally, this girl was being possessed and taken away, and she is being brought back and saved by the end via the sacrifice of this priest who lets the demon into himself so he can kill himself, and that, in theory, kills the demon. Although sequels are going to like ruin that, but like, and you know, that's the end of the movie.
Yeah,
is that he jumps out the window, he's possessed, goes down the stairs, and that takes the demon with him.
Very effective scene though. Like I love the.
Oh yeah.
You know, you see in like the change on his like face, and then like the struggle and the jumping out the window. It's you know, we're kind of glossing over and making jokes and stuff, but like, you know, it all works. Like,
hey, whoa! I'm trying to talk about it seriously. You're the one making the jokes. I'll have you know. So I think like. I think it's interesting though, because if you're looking at it through the lens of everything I've just been saying about this girl hitting puberty and becoming more mature, and this being about fighting back against that, it is interesting that she herself is like asking for help, like, you know, through the stomach, you know, the carving. This idea that in some level we don't want to grow up, even though most kids do want to grow up too fast. Like there is this idea of like wanting to actually hold on to your childhood a little bit longer.
What are you talking about? As I sit underneath shelves full of action figures and
yes, I agree. I have no such frivolous things.
Like 40-year-olds like standing at water coolers talking about freaking like the Spider-Man movie or whatever. What a
I feel like you are showing your age by saying water cooler. I don't think the water cooler is a thing anymore.
I mean, in reality, you know, I work from home, so I don't talk to anybody. But
you stand next to the fish tank and talk to the cats about the latest movies you've seen.
Pretty much, yeah.
Not that you have a fish tank. It was just the closest thing I could think of that you might have in the house.
Yeah.
The sink, I guess.
The toilet.
Speaking of, I can smell cat poop. I think one of my cats is just let out some demonic material of their own.
No good.
No, it's not. It's really not. Yeah, obviously there's like some of the creepy, like, effective moments. Obviously everyone knows the bed shaking, the vomiting, the head turning, which is obviously a great practical effect. But I want to point out the more subliminal things. I love the quick flash of the face.
That's great. And what's so cool about that, and I mean, I don't know if it was the same for you, but it was not like uh it wasn't like a thing that I caught my first time watching it. Like it definitely took like a few times, and then like when you see it, it's like, oh, holy shit! Like,
Yeah, I don't.
what was that?
I mean, I don't really remember my first viewing to know if I saw it the first time, but I would question that the first time was definitely on VHS in standard definition.
Yeah.
So I do wonder how much. Not, I mean, not that you wouldn't catch a frame because it's blurrier, but I do wonder how much of that type of like just the format at the time made it less obvious. Whereas now we're all watching, we're watching the remastered HD version, and
Yeah.
But it happens when Reagan's at the hospital. It happens to Father Karras when he's dreaming about his mother. This idea that maybe his mother is going to Pazuzu, like she has been taken in by hell. But then you also have it flashing during the exorcism itself. In fact, there's even a few moments where like it flashes to the actual creepy face, but it also there's a few moments where, particularly when just before Father Merrin's arriving in the taxi, there's some close-ups of like Reagan just waiting on him, like knowing that he's coming. And like she almost looks like the creepy face. It's almost like when she's surrounded by the darkness, it looks very similar to the face of I guess Pazuzu, if that's what we're saying that face is. But all that stuff's very effective. Like there's a great moment right before Chris goes up to the attic early on in the film. Like when she walks out of Reagan's room, like the way she's sort of lit, just with a little bit of light coming from underneath, looking up, gives her this great kind of like creepy sort of like aesthetic, and the shadows just play really well. But yeah, but there is some stuff that feels simple and gimmicky as well, like the like her candle like going into a fireball for a second is like, this is the same sort of spooky shit you get in any like sort of creepy possession movie, really. Not everything's like reinventing the wheel. Some of it is just straightforward, but like it's all handled very well.
Yeah, no, like it all looks good. And honestly, some of the stuff that I tend to like notice more on like rewatches is some like the more quieter moments, like when she's possessed, like because it's very easy to remember her like like going up and down, and then like things moving and levitating, and all the yelling and profanity and stuff. But I like when they're just kind of talking to her and she's like looking at them, and like she'll just answer stuff, but like just kind of like very like a little more quieter, and like it feels like creepier and more sinister, and like kind of like I don't know, there were some scenes like where she'd be interacting with them, and like it seems like she would take like a little longer to answer, or she would say something and then just kind of stare at them, and it kind of felt like an animal like looking at like prey or something. Like there was something very like sinister about it that I thought was very effective, and like that stuff I find like a little bit more eerie and creepier than some of the more bombastic stuff, because once she is like fully possessed, like the makeup is like really good and gnarly, and it's like it's just there's just something to it about like these people like talking to this little girl who just looks like she's so far gone.
So one of the elements that I want to talk about as well is so the director of the film that Chris is making, he actually dies off camera, and he dies by going down the same stairs that Father Karras does at the end of the film. And that gets like a detective into the film who's like sort of investigating the crime, and it's kind of weird. It's like the force of which this guy was like potentially thrown, and like his it seems like his neck was snapped before he went down. Is like someone big and strong had to do this, but in theory he was just with your 12-year-old girl, so that's not possible. But obviously we were like, she's possessed, so she does have that strength, whatever. But one of the interesting things about this that I was really thinking about in this watch is that so he's talking to Karras halfway through, and he's kind of striking a friendship a little bit, and it sort of like pays off at the end when he sort of befriends the other priest, Father Dyer. And both conversations go quite similar, where he says he likes films and he's a fan of films, and he even gets an autograph from Chris in one scene when he's like talking to her. But he talks about how he likes films. He invites Karras to go to one, and Karras responds, "Oh, who's in it, or what is it?" And he explains what it is, and he's like, "Oh, I've seen it." And then that repeats again at the end, where Father Dyer says the same thing. He's like, "Oh, I've seen it," and he, at least that's in the director's cut. I don't know if that's in the theatrical cut. That scene at the end.
Don't think it is. At least I didn't remember seeing that on this rewatch.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. But but it does repeat at the end of the director's cut, and I kind of like I was thinking about this and this idea that Reagan's mother is an actress, and she's in films. And then you've got this detective who also likes movies. And I was wondering that this little thing that repeats, it's in the director's cut anyway, where that line, "I've seen it already," and he smiles, is repeated again at the end. I did wonder if there was like maybe some like parallel the movies trying to draw with like seeking comfort in religion and seeking comfort in movies. Is there is kind of something to like to that comparison, and that this idea of like both characters saying "I've seen it already" is the idea that we already know about like God, we already know about religion, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't seek comfort in it, which I think is a more pleasant, gentle way of like pushing forward like a Catholic or religious message without the kind of "you need it in your life or you're doomed" kind of thing. Because it ends with a kind of a happy moment in the director's cut where they walk off to like go get a coffee together or go get lunch. Because I think the theatrical cut just ends with him looking down the stairs, right?
Yeah, that's the end.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. I have read the book before, but it's been a few years now. But if I remember correctly, the detective like was a much more of a bigger character in the book, and it's kind of funny. Like one of the traits I kind of remember specifically was like that he was like a big cinephile, and I think there was like scenes where they might have gone to the movies, or maybe it was just like the movie where it's just trying to get him to go to the movies. But that's interesting. It's interesting character. It
was just something I was thinking about on this watch, and like because when he started talking about movies, I was like, oh yeah, and Chris is an actress. I'm wondering if there's like this is like a running theme that the movies really try to get going about something here. And I just that was kind of what I was coming up with in my first sort of thought about it. But
it's like movies are the new religion, man. The theater's a church.
I mean, I think the idea that you take messages and you take like the idea that stories in the Bible are there to teach you lessons and to give you sort of morals and parables and things. Any good art has a message, like obviously Friday the 13th Part 7 doesn't, but like any like proper movie or book or whatever it may be, will usually have some kind of like lesson or some sort of critical thought that the writer or the author wants you to think about and maybe like reconsider your stance on something, like that's just a thing in art. It should be there.
I read a lot of books to my kid, and there's a lot of messages in them. Three Little Pigs.
That's true. I may be a little more highbrow where the adults are getting lessons with that, but yes, that's a good example. Yes. Is Wyatt at the age where he's comprehending the art of storytelling?
Oh yeah, no, he's. I mean, part of it is probably that because I'm such a big book lover and reader, and so one of the things I buy the most of is a lot of kids' books, which so even when he was like a baby, we'd read a lot to him. So I don't know if he is just a book lover like us, or it's just because kind of push it onto him. But we do read a lot, and there's definitely ones that he can kind of tell that he prefers and likes more than others, and ones will be like, oh, like read this one, read that one. So it's kind of nice. It's it's kind of funny because like and it weirdly maybe it's because watch so many like horror movies and stuff when I'm not with him, but it actually has been kind of nice like reading so many like kids books, and we don't watch that much like TV, but we watch like some shows like here and there, but like all the kids stuff is so unrelentingly like positive. It is actually kind of nice because like the world's a pretty messed up place, and like all the news is so depressing, and then if I'm not watching the news, I'm watching like some horror movie about like that's like about like some like dark shit. So it is kind of nice like just read these like overly pleasant and caring like books about like sharing and being a good person. It's kind of funny.
Movies for adults, the stories for adults tend to like this is how we deal with the darkness, but we have to get across what the darkness is. So everything's really morbid and not everything, but you know what I mean.
Human centipede and
well, not even this movie. Like ultimately, the message is saying seek comfort in the church because all these changes are scary and the world's a dark, bad place. Don't give up on this thing that can give you comfort and happiness. Whether or not you agree with that's a different thing. But that feels like what some of the movies try to get at is that the oldest, like, you know.
Profession?
Not profession, because that's prostitution, right? But
only you would know that.
What do you mean only I would know that? No, but
your line of work.
But the idea that all these new methods are good to a point, but you still need the church. You still need God in your life, because that'll... You know, that's the only way you can fight the oldest enemy, which is the demons, and this darkness is to fight it with the oldest light, which is, you know, the power of Christ compelling mother effers.
Yeah. It's more powerful than the light on your iPhone, that's for sure.
But I think that's, you know, part of the movie. So yeah, like I come at this movie a bit more cynical because of just who I am. Like, I just fundamentally don't necessarily agree with a lot of what it's doing, but in terms of its messaging. But that doesn't mean to say that, like, it's not really well directed. It's not creepy. It's not, you know, got good scenes of horror, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't handle its characters well, because it, you know, it makes you see that she is this nice, happy little girl with her mother before shit hits the fan. You feel for Chris maybe a bit more because she is a single parent and she's struggling with it on her own. You know, I think all those elements like work really well. The idea of like the tortured character of Karis, who's like struggling with who he is, finding faith again to save someone, is a good story. Like him like coming back from that and sort of finding something to believe in again, to give him strength is, you know, that works regardless of what it's about.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. That said, though, nothing wrong with sucking cocks in hell.
No, yeah, especially if, you know, it's between consenting demons and everything. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the implication is if you're sent to hell and you're doing it, you're probably not like consenting to it.
Oh, okay, yeah, that would not be great.
Because, you know, demons and hell and. Yeah. You remember the end of Tenacious D's film?
That's true.
He wants to take Kyle back to hell to be his bitch. Remember that?
I do, actually. I didn't realize you were a D fan. That's
I'm not a huge fan, but I've seen the movie, like a couple songs.
Yeah, not bad. No, I mean, I get what you're saying.
That's the crossover we all need is Beelzebub versus Pazuzu. Just because everyone will just like have so much fun saying it. One ticket for Beelzebub versus Pazuzu, please.
I'd be down. Yeah, no, I definitely get what you're saying. I don't disagree with it. I think it could be. It would be a lot easier to deny if it wasn't like so damn well done, you know, like it's because I think it's, even if like, you know, you don't agree with it or you don't like it, you don't like the subject matter, it's still really hard to deny like these performances, these, you know, this direction, you know, a lot of the stuff that happens in it, it's just it's just a whole other level. I mean, you know, this is what you get like during an era of, you know, good quality filmmaking with, you know, directors that know what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, I talk about the film being conservative, and people have often said slasher films are kind of, even though conservatives hate horror movies and slasher like films and want to ban them and censor them and stuff, because, you know, it's that thing of, oh, if you have sex or you do it, you know, whatever, you'll get killed for it. But to be fair, like the killer in those movies is the villain, and ultimately we root for like one of the characters, you know. So yeah. I can see what people are saying with that, but Like, if you ever hear Carpenter talk about Halloween and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I ended like the free love movement or whatever." There's a great quote from one of the making of documentaries where he's like, "I didn't really intend to like make that kind of message necessarily." I was just trying to have Laurie be this more heroic character who cared about the kids, who wasn't distracted. It wasn't about the fact that they're getting punished because they're having sex kind of thing. But it became a trope almost because people sort of copied that formula. But anyway, all right, what are you rating The Exorcist?
Oh, sleepy. Let's give it a 9.5.
Yawn. 9.5.
I'm really close to giving it the 10. I do think maybe some of the first half is like a little slow for me. But I mean, a very minor quibble. I still think a lot of it works. But yeah, I mean, other than that though, it's hard to deny like anything else in the movie. Again, there's a lot of really good stuff there, and it's it's a masterpiece. It's iconic. There's a reason why it's stood the test of time. What can I say? Good film.
I mean, it makes me want to walk down into my parents' party and just piss on the floor in front of everyone. That's what it makes me want to do.
Well, I mean, only if there's a random astronaut there that you want to.
That's right. There's like a random like little like insert here where there's two things about this party. There's an astronaut talking to a priest about going up next time and talking about how spacious the new like modules are and stuff. Which I guess the idea you've got a priest, like a man of God, talking to an astronaut who is like defying like a lot of the beliefs that of how the Earth was created and all that, and like going outside of Earth into space, and like I think that's to show the two extremes, to make you think about like those opposing ideas, because that's a big part of the movies, like religion versus no religion. But then you also have the fact that the drunk director keeps calling like the butler or whatever you want to call him, the servant. He keeps like making Nazi jokes at him, and he keeps getting angry. He's like, "I'm Swiss. I'm not German. I'm Swiss."
Very strange, but I do like the chaotic and like weird nature of this party.
I don't know if that's trying to say something or not, but I for the life of me, I don't know. But by all means, give me your interpretations of the drunk director's misdiagnosis and outright just harassment of the servant. But anyway, I'm going with an 8 out of 10. I think it's a good movie. I think it's really well directed. I think it's got great classic moments. It's got a nice sense of build, especially once you actually really get to the possession stuff. It's a bit slow early on, but that's okay. But yeah, fundamentally, like I just don't necessarily agree with maybe some of the messaging, at least what I'm reading from the movie when I watch it. And yeah, some of it is influenced by like hearing other people's thoughts over time. But once you hear them and you watch the movie, it's like, yeah, there's a reason why people have had these thoughts. There's a reason why they've said them, because I can see it. I can see it in the movie. Sure. So it leaves me a little colder than I think it does some people, and I think it's very effective. I don't think it's the most terrifying thing ever made, though. I think that's like one of those overhyped things where, like, people said, when I was getting into horror movies, when you watch The Exorcist, that's on a whole other level. And it wasn't. It was good, but it didn't like shock me or anything.
I mean, I'm curious if that's because that's definitely something like I heard growing up, because like there was like certain horror movies that I feel like were kind of in this like upper tier that were like, holy shit, like don't watch this alone, don't watch this at night, it's so scary. And yeah, like The Exorcist was one of them. And
I'm just gonna say it, Tim. It's all lies. Every single movie that anyone's ever said is too scary, don't watch it alone because blah blah blah. Every single part of it is hyperbole, and it is all lies, because I have never felt that watching a movie. And my god, that like I feel it when it's effective. I feel tension. I feel I feel the effect of good filmmaking. I feel the horror working. I never actually feel scared. And I know some people are more you know, they're more susceptible to actually feeling a bit scared, but they don't like watching horror movies because it freaks them out or whatever. Like, I get that. But if you like horror movies and you watch a lot of horror movies, I don't think that those statements are ever true. I think if you're someone who likes horror, all of it just washes off your back.
I mean, at this point in our lives too, like, like there's a lot of stuff that I can see, like, oh, when I was younger, that might have freaked me out.
Show Wyatt The Exorcist and see how he takes it.
But yeah, I mean, like, at this point, we've literally watched like thousands of horror movies, right? Like, it's very hard to get scared. And it's actually kind of what I was thinking about the other day is like, I don't think, like, I think the best that I can say is that like a movie never scares me, but if it's really effective, it might put me in the mood to be scared. Like, so, like maybe if I do watch a movie like late at night by myself, like, in the house, like when I'm alone and it's dark and stuff, and like if it is really creepy and effective, like after I watch it, it's not like I'm gonna be like, oh no, Jason is gonna get me. Like, it's not like I'm afraid of like what happened in the movie, but maybe I'll get like a little chill, like if I have to, go outside to like get something or take the garbage out. Like maybe I'll be a little more apprehensive and be like, oh shit, look over my shoulder and make sure no one's there. So like it's not like the movie itself is making me scared of what's in the movie, but it might put me in a mood where maybe I'm feeling a little more like cautious or something as I'm like skulking around. And that's kind of like the best credit I can give something at this point. But I don't even remember why we got on this tangent though.
Just talking about Exorcist being like overhyped almost as like, it's going to scare you like no other movie does. Not really.
I think the point actually, or I think what I was going to bring up is I'm curious if people still say that about it. Like maybe older people like our age still say that about The Exorcist, but I'm curious if like, like you're like a, I don't know, 8 or 9-year-old getting into horror movies. Is this still one of the movies that, people are like, oh man, like...
Well, I don't think people our age say it. I think we heard it from people who are older than us. I think our parents' generation all say that about The Exorcist. So we heard it growing up. I don't think
that was like a generation that was like more, conservative and more religious and stuff, and so it'd probably track that. That affected people a lot more than, our age or whatever. But
yeah. So it has this aura built up around it, and I don't think it. I don't want to say it doesn't live up to it, because it lives up to it as a good movie, but it doesn't live up to this idea of like, oh, I can't take it, it's too much to bear.
Right. Yeah.
The fear. So, anywho.
And like you said, if you watch it and you're all like flustered, try putting in like Terrifier 2 or something like that after.
Yeah, which obviously is a very different type of thing. That's more extreme in terms of gore and violence than it is, tension. I don't think Terrifier 2 ever tries to be... Well, it does a little bit, but it doesn't try to be like fill you with dread. It's very different. It's a very different type of movie.
Yeah, or if you just if you don't like cussing or something, then just put in like any Rob Zombie movie.
I just said Terrifier 2 earlier because I love the idea of like showing them just some of the scenes from that and seeing how they react to it. If
it's funny enough, like there is kind of a connection though, because like there are stories when The Exorcist came out about people like having heart attacks in the theaters, and like. What were the stories we were hearing about Terrifier 2?
Yeah, people passing out. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I get that at the time, having a little girl effectively saying some of the things she does is probably what... I would say that sounds more shocking than the actual scary stuff, like, for the time period. Like, in a movie, like, having a child say those things probably was the shocking thing to hear in the 70s. And not that it wouldn't, like, make us... like pause when you hear it in a movie today, but it's not like it's always that type of movie. That's what your mind does. You're like, oh, this is a movie that does that. Okay. Whereas back then, I imagine that there wasn't many examples before this where there was movies with kids talking about, sucking cocks and being whores in hell. I doubt it happened. So, yeah. But there you go. That is our all over the place thoughts on The Exorcist. So by all means, give us your thoughts on the film below, and support us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. if you want to get bonus content and all the likes. It is on pause whilst Tim's away, but there's a back catalogue of like almost 40 bonus episodes plus 12 even more streams episodes at the $5 tier if you want to go check out all those. And that'll return when Tim's back later in the year, so look forward to those. You can of course also like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, share us out with your friends. All these things do help. If you can't give us some pennies, that's okay too. Any and all help is appreciated, just as long as you enjoy the show and keep watching horror movies. So that is us. Thank you very much for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.